Today is December 18th, it's 4:30. This is the Water Quality Management Committee meeting. We have the usual cast of knowledgeable characters. We get out of here by 6:30, as we all know. Fairly straightforward but interesting agenda tonight. First and foremost, Jonathan, you going to take this on, please? Is it okay if Jonathan takes it on? You want to describe going to the selectmen and what we did?
Yeah, so on Monday night, Steve Layton and I went before the select board to talk about our, the idea we voted on previously on the refundable versus non-refundable tax credits and how we believe that's the way to go for people having to upgrade to the best available nitrogen reducing technology septic system or connect to the sewers. We gave, I think, a short and sweet presentation, laid out the arguments, and happily, Doug and his cohorts voted unanimously to approve the concept of taking this forward, going to other towns that are facing this issue, talking with them, also talking to the key state legislators in the Cape and Islands area, and starting to initiate the conversation of how we can move this forward, what needs to be done. They graciously agreed to write a letter to some of these politicians, showing their support for the concept. And I think now we're in a position to talk about next steps as the board. What do we want to do? How do we want to proceed?
Yeah, very well represented. I do believe at least one select person, if not more than one, said this seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So I would say that you and Steve should jointly continue to work together. Outline what you think the steps or opportunities are, and then we'll bring it back and we can kind of run through that, okay? So maybe by the next meeting, have some thoughts. Because I spoke one time with Dave Vieira about this concept earlier, and he was positive on it. I will reach through his office to try to obtain a summary of when it went through the first time, what the Department of Revenue got in terms of budget, finances, implications on tax revenue collections for the entire Cape, so we know where we're starting from and where we want to get to, okay? Good, excellent job, well done. Moving on to the next one, I see we got George here, which is good. We had a discussion before on the, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. I jumped to 4. This is Steve Layton now. A discussion and vote on the fairness of subsidies for the installation of advanced septic systems.
There were 2 pieces of paper that we sent around, and the purpose of the first one is simply a suggested outline for our discussion today. In other words, can we see if we can agree on some facts before we worry about what we might want to or not want to do about those facts. Right. And the second one, called net cost to homeowner, was my first stab at what the facts are, but I absolutely want to hear of any corrections to this that anyone wants to suggest.
Does everybody have it, and have they had a chance to read it?
Do you want me to put it up on the screen?
That'd be great. Why don't you walk us through this, Steve?
Okay, so there are 2 columns, one for sewer and one for IAs. And I purposely didn't put any dollar figures on because I want to see if we can even agree on the qualitative aspects of it without getting bogged down in one thing is $700, no, it's $730 or something. For the sewer, the main cost to the homeowner is the betterment, because the homeowner isn't actually buying anything. The town's buying it all. And then the homeowner is reimbursing the town. And I'm saying the gross is what the town spends on the system. The betterment is the 70% of it that the homeowner reimburses the town. And the, less the state tax credit and plus the annual fees. And for the, and I'm counting those other things, three things as zero as the baseline. I could put it as pluses there, but I decided to put it as minuses on the other side. So everything was a cost. And in the IA, I'm assuming that at first that the homeowner pays everything, the gross, minus any subsidy they get from the town, plus they have the lost value of the extra bedrooms that they would have if they had sewer instead, the lost value of the use of the land above their leaching field that they would have if they'd had sewer instead. And they still have all the costs of the Title V septic that they wouldn't if they had sewer. And there's also the state tax credit and annual fees. And for the purposes of this, I'm saying the gross for the sewer varies all over the place. And I know it's a little more complicated than this because there's the central part of it that the homeowner doesn't pay for it all. It doesn't go into the gross that is used to calculate the betterment. We can put that in if you want to. And the point is, as I see it, there are no benefits to the homeowner from the IA other than the cleaner estuary that benefits everyone.
You also have the potential cost of replacement.
Right. 30 or 40 years replacing the leach field.
Yeah.
That's right.
Or it could fail, or there could be problems. So
Right.
ongoing maintenance.
In fact, it's unfortunate that the A in IA means alternative because it really should be accessory. It's not an alternative to a Title V. It's an expensive accessory to a Title V. It's a supercharger for a Title V, but you still have that Title V to take care of.
It could stand for aggravation.
That's good too.
If you guys are gonna start having a dialogue, you need to go to the podium. Okay, sorry, just so we pick it up. Okay.
I'm interested in any corrections to that anyone wants to submit. Are you calling in people? Or
I am, I'm just
Yeah, I'm
making sure you're done.
finished, yeah.
Ed?
Okay, couple of things. Thanks for explaining the lost value of extra bedroom, because I was kind of puzzled by that line. So you're saying if they got a sewer instead, they would probably be allowed additional bedroom,
Right.
probably.
One. One.
Right, there is a flow
Oh,
neutral
Amy's got her hand
bylaw.
up. You wanna clarify the flow neutral bylaw?
The flow neutral bylaw limits properties in the sewer area to 4 bedrooms, whether they're, so it does, if you were starting with 2 or 3, then the sewer does allow you an extra bedroom, but if you're starting at 4, you do not. The exception is the New Silver Beach sewer bylaw actually limits them to 3 bedrooms. So there is a slightly different
Question
rule
for
for that
Amy.
area.
So in theory, if you put in a D-night system and it was sized for 4 bedrooms, you could do it, couldn't you?
Yeah,
And if you had 2 bedrooms, you could still add bedrooms.
yes.
But if your lot size limits the size of your leach field, then
That could be,
You can.
that could be
You
true.
know, along that line, there was an example when Little Pond Sewer Service Area went on street. There was a house on a large piece of property that could have put in 5 bedrooms. Because they had to connect to the sewer, they were limited to the 4. They lost a bedroom because of the sewer. Okay? So that door swings both ways, and I think that's important to recognize. Because, I have a philosophical issue with the
But you
whole
mean
concept.
they had 5 bedrooms?
They could have 5.
the
They
lot
had the
was big.
land
Oh, they could, okay.
to, and they bought a property for $1 million and spent another 3 on it. And could have, and wanted to add a bedroom. And they could have under Title V and town land size and everything else. they were not allowed to because they were on a sewer, they were limited to the 4. So they lost a bedroom because they were required to connect to the sewer. It's a two-way door.
Does the flow neutral bylaw apply everywhere in Falmouth? I mean, all the proposed sewer areas? Or was it just Little Pond?
No, the answer is, in order to get a 0% loan from the state revolving fund, you have to have a flow neutral bylaw. And so our expectation is that we are gonna get a 0% loan for sewers going forward from the state revolving fund. So therefore, it would apply. Right now, it doesn't apply until we apply for financing under SRF. We could decide not to go for financing under SRF and leave it wide open for whatever people wanted to do, but that would cost the town more money in terms of the upfront capital cost of the project. So I don't want to draw a hard line right now, but it's pretty much, go ahead, Amy. Did I misstate it?
No, just to clarify, the flow neutral bylaw applies to all sewered properties in Falmouth. So unless we changed the bylaw to refer to specific areas, it applies to all sewered areas, with the one exception of New Silver Beach, which has its own bylaw.
Okay, so on that line, we should put in sometimes in parentheses.
Right. It's, so that's not an absolute statement, but, I've just got a few other notes. On the costs, you correctly stated that in the IA column, you have to have a Title V. You have to add, if you're required under a town mandate, an IA module, which may be able to be retrofitted into your Title V, or if you're new construction, it's gonna cost you another 25, 30 grand to add the IA module to your $1 million plus project. As far as the sewer costs, there is a betterment, and you didn't put the dollar amounts, and I understand that, but the betterment, which under Little Pond was about 13.3, that is not eligible for the state tax credit. Betterment is not eligible for the state tax credit, so that is a total out-of-pocket cost. And yes, it was 0% for 30 years. I got about 26, 24 more to pay. I'll be 100 when I finish. But that is not eligible for the state tax credit. You do have eligibility, should your income allow it, and you pay state taxes, to get the state tax credit for your lateral connection from your house to the street. That can get the state tax credit, but only that. The annual fees, roughly with the betterment and the sewer use charge for someone on the sewer like myself, is about $100 a month, $1,200 a year. Very similar to the cost for the IA. So, those I think are important facts.
So you're saying the annual fees are approximately the same
Yes.
on each column?
Yes.
And that under sewer, unless state tax credit, we should put for connection only?
Is for connection only, not for betterment. You cannot claim a state tax credit for a betterment. Okay? The sewer connection and the start of the betterment is on a very short time frame, and I think that's important to note as we look at this issue, especially going forward with timing triggers and what have you. In the sewer, you don't get 5, 10, or 20 years to connect. When the line's there, I think it was a year after construction was completed, the betterment charges began, and you had to connect. And most people connected in a pretty timely fashion. They wanted to. We're paying for it. We might as well. We're paying the betterment fee. Let's do it. There was really no shortage of contractors that people feared would develop. They rose to the occasion. A lot of contractors got themselves new backhoes, trailers, and dump trucks, and became, made some good money over a few years of installing sewers and running laterals. So, I don't think we should be too worried going forward about who's going to put all these things in.
That's a different topic, totally.
It is, but I think, it's kind of, we're in a general what's going on and what is fair. Philosophically, I'm very leery of the whole concept of any subsidy from the town towards this. Certainly, I would not be comfortable with anything more than 30% of the cost of the IA module. But
I just want to do the facts at
Yep,
this point.
yep,
Not
that's
how
what I'm
long
saying.
it takes to build it, or
Yep,
whether
yep,
you
yep.
want subsidies.
Yeah, okay, that's the next page.
Right.
Okay, I'm done.
Any other comments?
Hold on.
Yeah, well, there is one cost to the sewer folks that I think is not in here, and that is that they are abandoning their existing infrastructure, which they paid for. You know, their septic system, which, you know, there is some value to that they are giving up when they hook up to the sewer. Right? If you, it's
Sorry,
like
I
you-
don't see that from an accounting standpoint. When they purchased that, they spent money on it, that's a sunk cost.
Right, but if it had a 35-year lifetime and they're only halfway through it, you could say amortized over 35 years, half the value still remains. I'm just pointing out that I think it's a little bit not apples and oranges the way you've got it set up.
Well, can I step in?
Are you done?
Yeah, that was it.
Two things, both on the financial front. Once the town says you can't use your installed septic system, even if it was installed 2 years ago, it's worthless in the real world. I mean, we can spin little castles of amortizing it over decades or
I
whatever.
want to jump in momentarily if I can.
That's the point,
Oh,
Tom,
don't-
it's
don't-
worthless.
Hold it. Just want to jump in.
But you paid for
Let-
it.
let-
Just hold on for 1 second. I want to jump in here a little bit. And George is out there, so George will help me out this. When I was on the Board of Health, and the Mara Vista sewers were coming in, the Board of Health developed a protocol that, knowing that the sewers were coming in, if somebody was selling their property and it failed the system or whatever, they were put into a position where if the sewer wasn't built, they'd have to replace the system and put a new Title V in, as I recall, George. Otherwise, they had to monitor the tank, make sure it didn't overflow, and hook up within 90 days of it being available, or something like that. So the idea that somebody's got to put a new septic system in because they're transferring property, and the sewer's showing up the next year, the town worked their way around that a little bit. So
I was just using that as an
I'm just
extreme
putting that up
example.
as not a good example. How's that?
Well, I think it's a valid example, but, I mean, these things happen. But the other point I want to make is these extra bedrooms.
And Jed was on the Board of Health at the same time. I'm sorry, Jed, I left you out.
These extra bedrooms are not a gift. They cost something. And if you look at what it costs to do renovations in Falmouth right now, an extra bedroom is a very expensive extra. So I
Well,
don't
it's just
think
the
you can,
privilege
wait
of
a
doing
minute,
it.
Steve. So you can't just say it's the lost value of extra bedroom. The net cost, again, taking Ken's model and amortizing new construction over 30 years, you've got a very valuable asset that you've had to pay a lot of money for. You would have if you could have put that bedroom in. So it's not free, that extra bedroom.
Granted, I mean, I just see I wish there was a real accountant here. I'm not one. I think I might be a little bit more of one than some people here, but I'm not one.
Are there any CPAs in the room? Okay, you're good.
Recovering, see.
The point is that real estate agents often use the phrase on-town sewer as a selling point for a property.
Yeah.
They never say, congratulations, you have an IA to take care of. They might say, where they know it's going to be mandated, it's already there, but that's a different thing. That's a specious economic argument. And in the case of the IA, I think the definition of value is isn't it something like what a willing buyer will pay a willing seller, given complete information?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see, people don't go out and buy IAs unless they think they're going to have to, or they're philanthropically inclined toward the health of the estuary. You would not quit your day job to go peddle IAs in some town where they're not required.
Right, no, I
And so I'm just trying to get a more accurate, so I'm convinced that the cost for the IA is greater. I'm just trying to get a handle on how much greater.
All right, I'm going to go to Jonathan.
I guess, getting along what you're saying about the real estate value, I think there's real property value gain when going to sewering, but have we quantified that so that we can put that into the calculus of this comparison? You know, what would a price of a little pond home prior to sewering be compared to what it sold for, the same house, same lot, after you went to sewers? I mean, there's a real quantification of that value that I think needs to be done.
Yes, I wish I knew how to do that. As I said,
Well, you talk to realtors.
I'm
Realtors
not a
can
real
tell
estate
you.
agent.
Yeah, realtors can
But
do
you have to,
that.
There's an
they
algorithm.
could correct for the inflation that occurred at the same time.
Correct, yeah.
So if you look on the thing that's in parentheses at the bottom, this is what this is what Steve believes, and he thinks that this should be the position of this board to advise to the selectmen, which is that there are no benefits to the homeowner for installing an IA. So I'd like to,
Yeah,
for you folks to consider this. Steve thinks that this board should take a position that there are no benefits to a homeowner from installing an IA.
And then let the select board decide what to do with that fact.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
pass that along or not.
You want an opinion?
Yeah, I mean, Steve wants this board to either vote it up or down.
I disagree.
Okay,
I disagree.
okay,
And I disagree.
okay.
Yeah,
I disagree.
yeah. So that's
What's
a
the
straw
benefit?
vote.
Well, it's not a trivial thing if your estuary that you live on is cleaner, you get a distinct benefit from
No,
it.
I'm admitting that benefit, but
Yeah.
everybody benefits from that.
Well,
So I'm
but
saying
some
everybody
people
should pay.
benefit more, and the people who actually live there benefit more.
But if you look at that map, most of the people who will be, are nowhere near the actual estuary.
Fair enough. So their benefit is somewhat decreased as you go further away.
Well, into the same realm as the people that aren't required, that live over here, the same distance from the estuary, but they're not in the watershed.
Yeah, it can't be perfectly equitable, I agree.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yes, I know I'm gonna get yelled at about this, but suppose, to simplify the argument, we get rid of the history, we don't worry about sewer betterments and reimbursements, anything else, we just say that our plans for geoboundaries are calling on a disproportionately small fraction of the people in town to pay a disproportionately large amount of money to benefit the community as a whole.
I like that.
Thank you. So anyway, that to me
That's a-
is
that's
this
a
core
cleaner way
part
to
of
say
the
no
argument.
That's a very good way of
It's a
saying it.
cleaner way of saying it rather than no benefit.
Right, so, I mean, it's obvious beneficial to the community, that benefits are diffuse in time and space, but it's got to be clear, if you want to be dramatic, with the state breathing down on us with these deadlines, is the town has to do something. And I think, and I hesitate to use fairness, but it is the fair thing to do, is to help as much as seems to make sense for the people that are gonna have to do this, follow through, because I could see, anyway, I don't wanna get any farther than that, but that's my idea, is the sewer thing has kind of become a straw man that we can poke at and try to figure out exactly what happened, when and why and how. And the big issue is we're calling on a few people to make a much larger proportional contribution to this thing than the rest of the populace.
Absent of the town agreeing to some form of subsidy for those people.
Well, the
Without-
subsidy would
without-
try to balance
Yeah, no, I'm
that.
saying without a subsidy.
Right, yeah, without a subsidy, it's unfair and
Okay, I
disproportionate.
just wanna,
Anyway, that's the way I would like to leave it.
I'll entertain the board, I'll come back, but I want to give the folks in the audience, if they want to chime in on this conversation to speak. George, yep.
What he said, simply because, just to make a statement to the selectmen that there's no benefit to a homeowner, no real benefit, no cost advantage to do this, I see no I'm wondering why the committee would take it up like that. I like the idea of making everybody aware that people who put in IA systems may bear a cost disproportionate to those on sewer, because I've always thought that. The only benefit I'm gonna get from a sewer, direct benefit, is I go take a dump where there's somebody who's served on sewer. I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna think to myself, gee, I hope the EP doesn't knock on my door and make me put an IA system in. So I definitely think Mr. Duncan has a better way to phrase it, because that's the truth of it. You could say, is it gonna cost a homeowner more? Sure. Yeah, if you wanted to make that statement, but why would you present that statement to the selectmen? For what purpose? To point out a fact? It's better to put it in context of the fact that these people who put in IAs, divert urine, put in composting toilets, they are all going to disproportionately pay, because they're gonna pay for the sewer and they're gonna pay for their system.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
What he said? Okay. Are you putting your hand up to speak? Okay, Amy?
He was saying he agreed with George.
I just had a very quick thing, which is following up on what Ed said originally. If you're looking at cost, the sewer column is not including an important cost, which is the cost to connect to the sewer. So it's making it look like the betterment is the only main cost, but there are two main costs, the betterment and the cost to connect to the sewer, if you were going to present this again.
And the homeowner pays the cost to connect?
Yes.
Okay.
But that cost to connect is also subject
Eligible
to
for the
the
subsidy,
the
the
state
state
credit.
tax credit.
Yeah,
But only that.
right.
That's the state tax.
Not the betterment. Can I ask a question?
You can.
When we came
You
up,
can you ask a second question, too?
when the committee came up, or whoever came up with it, who came up with the 70-30 split for betterment cost versus the homeowner cost, versus?
Somebody that did the first round of sewer.
Well,
I don't know who that was.
road betterments are also 70-30, aren't they?
Yeah.
Doug?
But each community gets to set their betterment scale. Amy, do you?
That was what we did for Mara Vista, Falmouth Heights, and there's no reason to do it differently in the future. But that's not a magic number. That there have been other distributions in the past in Falmouth, and so I think there's a good precedent for that now. But it's not a fixed number.
Right,
For
well,
Falmouth.
I asked because, if there was some real reason, that would be worth considering, but absent that.
I'm going to try to answer the question. I think back when Boyer was running the town, he did some stuff looking at, depending on where you set the betterments, how the numbers worked out. And the town then agreed on that 70-30.
But
My memory of that was, the precedent for the 70-30 was New Silver Beach.
yeah, I think that,
Let's not get into that one. No.
What was the?
In fact, we voted
I'll just say
first for not giving the people in New Silver Beach anything.
right.
And came back at another town meeting and said, we'll do it the way we've done it elsewhere.
Well, but the other thing about New Silver is that we split the total project cost differently. In New Silver, the people connecting to it paid 70% of the entire project cost, including the treatment plant. For other projects, we've split it 70-30 of the collection system portion of the job. So it's been different over time. I think the Little Pond precedent is a good and reasonable precedent.
so
And
then,
I would just, thank you for filling that in. So there is some history on this 70-30 number. But I do believe that for any project that goes forward, somebody, I believe it's the Board of Selectmen, upon the advice of the finance director and the finance committee, has to adopt a betterment for that project.
That's correct.
So, yeah, at some point, if somebody wanted to make it 60-40 or 75-25, they could. So that all goes back to, again, the overall finances, the money available, and how it's gonna get paid.
I believe the precedent from when Woods Hole and Main Street areas were sewered was the opposite, more like 60% by the town and 40% by the connectors, and there was a lot of federal money involved and everything else. So-
90 cents on the dollar was federal.
Yeah, so,
Okay, so
it
that's
was a
whole
cheaper
different-
project,
Whole
but
different, whole different dollar.
the
Yeah.
philosophical percentage was different. The town paid more than the homeowner, whereas
Federal government paid a lot more than the
Yes.
homeowner.
So, you know, it's a different animal, but that is a pretty good precedent now. But yes, it has to be voted on each project by the select board. I remember very distinctly the night they voted on the 70-30, because it was about 11 o'clock at night after a very long meeting, and there was gonna be a discussion, and there was no discussion. It was just, this is what it's gonna be, bam, boom, we're going home. Anyway, back,
But I guess.
That's how
I'm saying-
federal government budgets get passed.
Okay, but just for for the way we kind of are looking at the bigger picture, or, you know, where things may evolve to, we're continuing to work within a 70-30 model until we find out that something's different, okay?
I wanna go back to,
Wait, can I say
Larry.
before?
Hold on one second. I think the gentleman to your.
Well, I
right
just,
started to
I
ask.
mean, I asked that
Come back.
question
Next.
because, you know, I feel there's value to the fact that there's precedent. And I keep imagining that if I was on the sewer and, you know, I'm paying 70% and the town is contributing 30, and then my next door neighbor, I've said this before, you know, happens to have an IA system and gets 100%, subsidy, I would feel very cheated by that.
But I don't think that's gonna happen.
Wait, what about 70-30 for the IAs?
Yes.
Is that what people are saying?
That's kind of what I'm saying, is I think some subsidy might be merited, but I would go with just keeping our precedent, so that everyone's treated the same,
Can I
if we can do it.
seize the moment, Mr. Chair?
Tom,
I think he's,
I
oh,
believe
Ed,
Ed-
sorry.
I cut Ed off to
Okay.
let.
I just
Ken
wanted to go back to your very eloquent philosophical statement that we kind of decided, I don't know what's the point of making it, but the same statement can be made about people on the sewer, because they pay a disproportionate share of improving the estuaries that benefits the entire town. But the same words that you use so eloquently applies to people that are required to sewer.
Exactly.
I don't know what's gonna happen and what the betterment numbers will work out when Amy gets her final costs and stuff for the next sewer phase. I'm sure it'll be probably more than what we pay at Little Pond, and then there's all the inflation and everything else. So the numbers aren't going to go down.
No.
And I'll leave it at that.
No, the only place they might go down would be Seacoast Shore, because Seacoast Shore is denser than Mara Vista. Okay, I will get to you in a second. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, it's just, I'd like to propose, in the interest of moving the discussion forward, a motion that our committee's in favor of providing some sort of relief for those individuals required by whatever conditions we have finally resolved, some sort of financial relief. The details to be determined later, but I think we need to make it clear to the select board what our feelings are just on that, because that's a fundamental building block of any discussion, any plans that go forward, is the committee think that's a good idea.
I would second that.
I think that's page 2 of your presentation, Steve.
Yeah.
Which we ought to go to.
Go ahead. Can we go to the second page?
We didn't really resolve one, but maybe we should keep going. That's up to you, Steve.
Yeah.
Well, we kicked around a lot of the costs. I think, Steve, you got
So
the
I
sense of
thi-
this board, that this board does, the majority of this board, or plurality of this board, whatever that is, does not believe that we should be making a statement that there's no benefit. We got a replacement statement from Tom that, maybe, Tom, we can make sure that it gets in the minutes, so that we have it there and we can start to use that phrase going forward, that this is what we're doing and this is what's happening.
Is the term, I don't like subsidy. I prefer the term financial relief, that there should be some sort of financial relief for those individuals that are gonna end up,
Or assistance.
yeah, or assistance, whatever term you wanna use.
All right, I'm gonna go to Jed. Board of Health or citizen?
I'm speaking as a citizen. I can't
Okay.
speak for the board. So, Jed Goldstone, Precinct 2. I think, thinking about this as the benefit is a diffuse benefit for everybody in town. So if you take this to the logical conclusion, if there is no, the benefit for, that was allowed for going up to 4 bedrooms was something that then those households who are allowed to connect to the sewer, who are required to connect to the sewer, could go up to 4 bedrooms, and they paid a certain amount of money, and they got the benefit of having at least the permission to go up to 4 bedrooms. However, if you take it to the logical conclusion of thinking about an IA system and requiring an IA system, or for that matter, requiring a sewer for a household that can't go up to 4 bedrooms, that in fact there is not, they're bearing all of the cost for a diffuse benefit for the town. And perhaps, in fact, you should think of it the other way. The town should be paying everything except for those households that get a specific benefit. I'm not necessarily saying that that's the best way of doing this, but it is in some sense, it is the most fair way of doing it.
I totally agree with you. Thank you.
Steve, I just have one more
Yeah,
comment.
go ahead, Jonathan. John?
I think it's the 500-pound gorilla in the room is we received a note from town council back in August that said basically subsidies for IAs was not recommended by council because it's on private property.
Correct.
And that's going to stand between us and having the town move forward unless there's a change in the interpretation of that law. And I think Steve, Layton, and myself agree there's probably grounds to make that argument that, you know, it is benefiting the greater population as we've talked about, and thus it should be part of the town's
It's
purview.
my understanding that Peter Johnson Staub and others are already working to change that.
Right.
There are also many people who don't want to be named, who know what they're doing, who think that that opinion is incorrect. But, I mean, which is a diplomatic way of saying that is that it's perhaps not hard to get it changed, or to establish that in fact it simply isn't true.
Perhaps, but we have to move forward with that. It has
Yeah,
to be an important
but
part of this.
if the fact that we might not be able to do it, you could say therefore it's a waste of time to discuss what we should do. I think I don't totally agree with that. I think it does no harm and may do some good to come up with what is equitably fair, as Jared said.
Well, that's not what I'm saying. You're misinterpreting. What I'm
Oh.
saying is we need to have a plan like we're doing for the tax credits. How can we help influence that decision with town council, with the knowledge of the people on this board, to move it forward? Because we all agree that some form of subsidy financial assistance is warranted for people going to IAs, but there may be an interpretation by town council that says just the opposite.
Oh, I agree with
At the
you.
current time, so
How are we gonna do
I
that?
want to jump in. At the current time, we have the opinion from town council, and it's the opinion of our town council, so it governs this town, whether other towns have a different opinion or not. My understanding is there are 2 ways that we can get to allowing a subsidy on private land. The first is to go to the legislature with a special act, a home rule petition. I don't know if Peter Johnson Staub is working on that or not. That's the first I heard he might be working on. The second one is one that personally I think has got some political value to, and that is if we decided that the cost of this whole program is of a scale that it warrants some level of Proposition 2.5 override, specifically targeted for the money raised for subsidizing IA sewers, that would be subject to a 2/3 vote at town meeting. Then it would have to go to the May election, and would have to get a majority of votes. Once that happens, the town is then, as a majority of the citizens of the town, and the 2/3 has stated that the town is on board with spending that money, and we don't need a special act of the legislature. So, you know, to the extent that you go to the legislature, then you turn around to people, and so there's 2 ways to get there, okay? I keep looking at the numbers, and I keep looking at the overall capital budget a little bit. I haven't even factored in what some of the sewers are gonna be. And I see that there's a budgetary issue to both sewer and put IAs in that's gonna have to, over the next 2-year period, be dealt with. Be dealt with. And it's the third rail, but I'll sit here and say, we probably are gonna get to the point where we have to do some specific Proposition 2.5 override. Okay?
Can I add? And I think that the second one that you mentioned is what the town council was telling you and me when we met with her.
Yeah, unofficially. But what I'm saying is, I know that there's avenues to get there. What's our role in propelling that forward? It doesn't happen on its own. There needs to be some sort of driving force, and maybe that's already being done by the select board or others. But what is our role in moving that forward?
I think our role is to say things like Jared and Tom said. Admit that there at least needs to be a 70-30 split for the IA.
Doug Brown would like to speak.
Hi, Doug Brown, Select Board. I would just say that you just recommend what you think is best, identify any obstacles that may be out there, and send it along to us, and we'll try to get to work on it. We're going where nobody's gone before with these IEAs, with the subsidy, and I think the town council's right. You know, historically, there's a prohibition of spending tax dollars on private property, but this may prove to be an exception because it's such a big
Just
initiative.
a small clarification. Down Cape, I think it's Wellfleet, they got an SRF loan, and they are subsidizing private property down there. The SRF would not provide a loan for something they felt was not legal. So our town council's opinion and the state SRF bond council and Wellfleet's town council have a different viewpoint on whether or not you can do this or not.
And a lot of people were surprised about that. But still, also just remember, the town council's job is to be cautious and to be,
Yeah, I'm not
you know,
faulting her.
warning us when we might be going astray, and heads up, this might not be legal. You know, she advised us not to approve Seafood Sam's because the restaurant service didn't meet the governor's COVID requirements. But we said, you know, we weren't willing to put a restaurant out of business because we might be in trouble. So we voted to approve it anyway against advice, and we said if the governor wants to come down and talk to us, she can, but nobody came, so. That's probably the same case in Wellfleet. They're probably just saying it's for the good, so, you know, it's what the town wants to do, let them do it. So it could happen.
Tisbury is doing it too.
Yeah, I just want to be sure. You done, Jonathan?
Yes.
Okay.
Tisbury on the Vineyard is doing it. I believe they're using some ARPA funds. And when that money runs out, I don't know what they're gonna do, but they are subsidizing IA installation in their mandated zone.
I think the advice we just got from Doug is good advice. We shouldn't necessarily have to figure out all of the mechanisms of the subsidy, but as we put together a package to go before the selectmen early in the year about where we're at with, you know, advice on the need for IAs and the potential extent for IAs, we can include something in that about, you know, as we look at this, we believe that to make it fair, there's gotta be some level of subsidy, and that we need to find a path forward to get to that subsidy. Is that?
That sounds right.
Okay.
So what does the board want me to do? To edit this? To poll everybody offline and try to fix it up? Or ignore it and just say, be fair? Doug, it's your problem? Or?
I think we already did a polling of the board and said this, a large majority that disagrees. I'd say, let's go to page 2 and see where we're at.
So,
Okay, so, but
So-
I don't mind, it's just that, okay, we don't agree on the facts, so let's just go ahead and decide what we're gonna do. Sort of.
I just think,
let me step in here.
it's,
Let me just step in momentarily. Sort of the next step of where we've gotten to with looking at IAs and geoboundaries is to put together some type of presentation in the 15-minute to 20-minute realm to tell the Board of Selectmen where we're at with all of this. We were hoping to get through some joint meeting with the Board of Health. That's, I don't know if we have a date certain or not yet. So I think it's a little bit resting on my shoulders momentarily and Kristen's. We'll put something together and bring it before this board to go through what we believe this board wants to articulate to the selectmen around the idea of geoboundaries and fairness and subsidies.
Okay.
Okay? I mean, we've got a map that's show a big map showing 6,000, 7,000 parcels in town, and we got there and everything, and we need to let the selectmen know that that's where we're at. And that, you know, and that ties back into, I gotta get from Amy, revisit the timetable to do the watershed plans, you know, when are we gonna try to line people up and get those done,
I'm looking at more sewers.
and look at more sewers. Right.
Steve, could I just
Please, John,
chime
save
in?
me.
I mean, I think if the reality is we're going to be putting in a lot of these IAs, and we're trying to think how we can equitably help those people to do that. And we're talking about having a responsible management entity to deal with those things. We can't do it with individual homeowners being responsible. So it seems to me, early on, we suggested one way we can do to help that is, for instance, to subsidize the IAs by buying the IA hardware. And that means we give monetarily the same amount of money to every single person who's installing an IA. The town and its management entity can put out to bid for the IAs. We then have the advantage of having one type that we have to maintain for each specific project. I just think that that makes a lot of sense for how we think about going ahead.
If I could, that triggers a question for me, for Amy. How did we do the grinder pumps? Wasn't it the same kind of an arrangement?
Yes.
So it seems like we've already got a model for it.
Just to let you know, town council has said we shouldn't have done that.
We were successful.
Yeah.
I like John's idea. I think that people are confused a little bit. Let me give maybe a silly analogy, but make one. Let's say that John and I go out to lunch together, and we agree it's going to be Dutch treat, but we forget to tell the waitress. And we forget the fact that this restaurant prohibits split plastic. So he spends $10, and I spend $20, and the waitress comes with the bill. Either he pays it, and I reimburse him the $20, or I pay it, and he reimburses me the $10. The cash flow is exactly the same, but one's a betterment and the other's a subsidy, if one of us is the homeowner and the other one is the town. In other words, functionally, John's idea is perfectly good, and I like it, but, it's agreeing with me that there ought to be a subsidy. It is a subsidy relative to the total cost.
I do think the one thing we have to remember about IAs is each individual installation is going to vary in cost dramatically, depending on the site and what has to be done, whether they can take advantage of their old septic tank and their existing field. So all of that's going to vary, and that was our West Falmouth experience, that putting in these things is going to vary from property to property. One way we can make it equal and that the town can help each participant equally is by providing the hardware. And then if the homeowner wants to do a huge amount of landscaping or whatever, that's on them to pick up that portion.
Totally agree with you.
Yes.
So, John, you know, we've heard from at least a particular vendor that the hardware might be $23,000 or $25,000. So you're fundamentally proposing that the town pick up $25,000.
Or a fraction of that.
It might be tricky if we say, you've got to use this unit and you've got to pay the town back for the difference, whatever.
Again, you know, when we go out with a contract with economy of scale, are they gonna cost $25,000?
They're not going to drop to 5.
No, they're not gonna drop to
Not
5,
gonna
but they
drop to
might
5.
come down to 15.
Yeah, but, okay. All right. Sure.
Okay, you know, the concept, I think, has a lot of merit, and the precedent that Doug and Amy confirmed about the grinder pumps somewhat reinforces that. I can't remember whether it's Wellfleet or some other municipality in the country that's doing an IA subsidy, and they are limiting it to the cost of the IA add-on. Not trying to do a percentage of a whole new Title V or anything else, purely the IA. And I think what you're suggesting, I am concerned about the, hey, wait a minute, how's he got an exclusive for the town of Falmouth for 10,000 or 5,000 systems? That's another issue. But to take, okay, we're gonna contract for X number of IA modules, and let's say they're 25,000 for a number, and then what percentage of that would be the town's ultimate cost versus, hey, homeowner, the total cost is 25, you're paying 70%, and the town will kick in 30. I think it's not a bad path. Should we agree that a subsidy makes sense, and could we find the budgetary resource, because it's not in any capital plan to do this, but that's not a bad way to go. But I think what Steve just said, a percentage of that hardware cost is the liability of the homeowner. So it's not 100%, because if you gave the homeowner a $25,000 tank and his system cost 40 or 50, you're giving them a 50% subsidy, and I don't think that's the direction we want to go. But anyway, I think there's some merit in pursuing your thought just on that basis, and then do Steve's idea of a percentage of that the homeowner will assume, and the town will only assume a smaller portion of it.
The procurement problem, I think, would be solved by the town would go out for bids for, say, the first 100 systems to get a good price, but not to commit to everything at once.
Right.
For all kinds of reasons, technically and financially. And you'd install those, and you'd see how it goes. And a few years later, they'd go out to bid again for, say, 500, and so on. So no one company would be guaranteed the whole thing to begin with.
It's gonna take forever to make the IAs work and improve the estuaries, and I think our mission is to try and improve them quicker rather than later.
Whatever, I'm not speaking for the total schedule, I'm just saying you do it in stages, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Stages will stretch out the entire horizon to do this thing, and I think it behooves us to try and make this happen quicker, so that some of us might see it a benefit in our lifetime, but not all of us.
I'm gonna wrap this discussion up,
Yes.
unless there's something new. We'll not be at the next meeting, it'll probably be the meeting after the next meeting. I'll have some sort of draft for everybody to distribute ahead of time and sort of begin looking at what do we want to say to the selectmen in terms of what we've been doing for the last year, and advising them on things that are coming down and actions that they may have to take. Okay? All right. Ken, I don't know if this is you or Kristen about an update on the Snug Harbor.
I think it's Kristen.
So, I can do this. Ken and Ed and I have been talking about the Snug Harbor PRB idea, and looking at the letter of intent, the requirements for it. So, I've been talking with Paul Dombrowski from Isotech about it. He is working on some cost numbers for it, so it seems like we're gonna move ahead with the letter of intent. See how that goes if we're invited to a full proposal. So I've started drafting. Steve Rafferty put in to get on the select board agenda for consent to apply for it. So we're slowly moving along.
Good. Corin? BBC willing to throw a couple of dollars to the project if we get it? Take that message, take that request back, okay?
I'll take that request
Yeah.
back, sir.
It'd be great to have, of the people that are participating and throwing in a little extra cash on the side, it'd be great to have you on board with that.
Steve, I have a question on that topic.
Come back to you. So at the select board meeting the other night, you got a presentation from the Association for the Preservation of Cape Cod. They're looking at doing the engineering and permitting work to replace the culvert, what is known as Oyster Pond, out in the back end of Falmouth Harbor, up behind the Chappie, I think, right? So to the extent that one of the options is the bike path, they're kind of in front of us about what does it take to get permission to do work on
We
the bike
talked
path.
about that, and the issue was that, as you know, it's owned by the Commonwealth, the right-of-way, so.
But Eversource got an easement for their cable, so that it can be done. I'm just pointing out that we've got somebody out there already engaged in how to have that happen, and we can learn from that should we go forward, so.
Right. Yeah, we talked about the two potential sightings, the right-of-way of Nashawina Road, or which is closer to the harbor, would have a more immediate effect, and maybe you could go shallower versus the bike path where you're a little further away, but don't have any of the issues of encroaching on wetlands, et cetera.
We get a grant, we take that to the next step and make a decision where we want to put it. Get a grant, we make the next decision. Tom?
Yeah, I don't know whether this question is for Amy or Ken or both, but how much do we know about where the quote, clean water is relative to the bike path and relative to Nashawina Street? Because,
We know a lot, actually.
because when I read the minutes, it said you had data from 2017.
Yeah, well, they've continued, the wells that we've been using are getting old, so some of them are failing, so we're
Yeah.
not. But, there's actually a paper that is currently in review where they've looked at all the data up as far, to 2023.
Yeah,
By the way, how's the recovery from your operation?
I'm up and moving around and taking questions.
Terrific. At the last meeting, Ken gave a nice presentation. I'm passing it to you,
Oh.
which will in more detail answer your question.
Yeah, so, my main concern was, because I did get a chance to look at the minutes, was that he cited data from 2017.
Yep.
And given how finely grant funding grist mills grind, and the length of time involved, we get an application in, and it gets approved, and it gets funded, so maybe 3 years from now, we've got stuff in the ground. And I don't know whether all of the livestock have already left the barn and we're slamming the door after they've left. I don't know whether it would be an effective use of resources.
So the prediction of the most recent paper that I said is under review, is
Right.
that it will be 21 more years before we return to baseline.
How could they get so screwed up on their predictions?
Well, it's, the mechanism is unclear. But, the point is.
Okay, good,
The plant, even though they've reduced dramatically, the inputs, they're still inputting a lot of water.
Right.
And nutrients, and until there's the outfall.
Right, okay, that just occurred to me that, particularly given the bike path site, it's so far inland from the harbor that we may have missed it.
It appears that the optimum site will be in the right-of-way inland of Nashawina Street.
Yeah,
So there's a question of access, there's, privately owned property, there's willingness of at least one homeowner already to allow access, and others that'll probably tag along because they want to clean up that mess. And what Ken's saying is the main point. It's gonna be years before what's in the ground flushes out.
yeah.
And my whole reason for looking at this starting last summer was, damn, this is a mess that the town created. Is there anything we can do in a reasonable time frame at reasonable cost to correct this, ameliorate it, knowing that, in 10 years, we might have an outfall and we'll stop putting it in, but it'll still be flowing through, so is there something that can be done in the next 10 years that will help this thing?
Right,
And
yeah,
that's
as I
why we're
said,
going through the exercise.
Yeah, no, I agree completely.
I mean, it's improving.
With that.
There's no question of that.
Yeah.
It's improving.
But the more we put in, the more nitrogen, even though it's only at 3 parts per million. We added flow, little pond, sewer service area. We're looking at Tasca. And
Well, that's the other thing, is we keep bringing more
Right.
properties online,
Yep.
so.
so that's where we're at.
Kristen, you want to add anything?
Nope.
Okay. So we'll, I guess, Doug, we're looking to get on like one of the consent agendas or whatever, get permission to submit a grant application. We submitted the paperwork this week. And we need to do it by January 17th, is that the?
Yes.
So I don't know, I don't have the schedule for the select board, but you probably meet the first week and then the third week? Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
6th of January, I believe, the next meeting.
6th? Okay. Okay. All right, no more on Snug Harbor? Good? All right. Moving on, a little bit of a continued framework discussion of potential rules for implementing advanced septic systems. John, you've been participating in the Board of Health, and we have 2 Board of Health members here. There were a couple of items in what we were looking at as some of the rules that maybe we revisit or clarify a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't attend this week's meeting, George, but I think basically we're at a stage where we need a joint meeting of the committee and the Board of Health. I'm not sure that there's much more than that to discuss.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do a quick poll of this board. The Board of Health, you guys start, what time, George, on Monday nights?
Monday nights, yes.
Yep, what time?
5:30.
5:30. So they typically meet Monday night at 5:30, an hour later than when we start. One of the issues when we tried to set up a joint meeting was a number of people on the Board of Health being able to be available at 4:30 on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
So in order to precipitate some type of joint meeting, if everybody on this board feels that they could make a 5:30 on a Monday night, what I think I'd like to propose to Kristen, if we can, is not on one of their regularly scheduled nights. With the Board of Health would meet on a Monday night. You guys all must have availability at 5:30 on a Monday night,
Right.
right? So we could try to set up a meeting on an off week from when your regular agenda is, just for this, okay? And we'll work through Scott to try to set that up for a 5:30 time, all right?
Well, you can find out right now.
I can't speak for the Board of Health.
No.
Is anybody here not?
Assuming they can do the 5:30 on Monday, what do you think?
Is anybody
What?
here not available at 5:30 on a Monday?
Do you guys know what your off weeks are for January?
We are meeting on the 6th.
Okay.
And we are meeting on the 27th.
So
Want to shoot for the 13th?
So
So
we go
either
to
the
the 13th.
13th or the 20th, and the 20th is a holiday.
We'll go for the 13th. Go for a
13th.
week after the 6th.
I should note, I cannot speak for the availability of everybody on the Board of Health because some people have work travel requirements.
Yeah, no, we'll go through Scott on that, but I got 2 of you here. If I could get 1 or 2 more, then I got a majority.
So, are we going to agree on a joint agenda and post that ahead of time? I'm getting a little bit into the weeds now, but I wanted to, because it's not very far away, the 13th.
I would say that we've had a working document from John for a little while.
Oh, okay, great.
So I would suggest that what we want to say is that, we want to look at this and say, is this where we are sort of at?
Okay.
And then say, this is where this board is at. We want to meet with the Board of Health and find out whether we're in agreement on all the stuff or whether there's some divergence. And the last time around, my recollection, there were 2 items that generated a fair amount of discussion. One was whether or not new construction was based upon assessed value or appraised value. I think we as a group decided assessed value.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just
Yeah, that's in the minutes.
I'm going over this just to be clear on it. The second one is whether or not new construction currently, and I believe the Board of Health has been going down a path to say that new construction requires innovative alternative systems, and we've been sort of on the path of, new construction in nitrogen-sensitive areas, not all areas. And that's an area that we probably need to have a conversation. Now, there are several watersheds that are, for lack of a better word, they're not nitrogen impaired, or they're not listed as an impaired watershed. There's at least one watershed that's, the state identifies as an impaired watershed, but it does not have a TMDL for it, and that's Herring Brook over in West Falmouth. So I could see some rationale for saying, you know, that if the state's identified a watershed as impaired or whatever, an estuary as impaired, that it'd be logical not to build something new without an IA system. But if you're building a new building, say, down on the moraine running down to Woods Hole, you're in a watershed, but you're not in a nitrogen impaired watershed or a thing designated by the state as impaired, so.
And if the town ever, if we ever agree that the town has any share of this cost, why is it in anyone's interest to require them being built somewhere where they're not needed? I mean,
You want me to give you an answer, because I don't have one?
You see my point, though?
I do,
Okay.
yeah. You know. And, no, yeah, Jed, do you have, Jed, did you ever get a copy of what we've got as our sort of, we call them our triggers? So maybe the thing to do is,
I saw, I'm sorry, I was at the, yes, I was at a meeting before.
No, but-
I just,
so I would suggest that we, I would entertain a motion for this board to forward our work on, you know, required use of IAs and airs to the Board of Health for their,
Well, have we
I
seen
so
this?
move.
yeah, we saw this at our last meeting.
They've had it. And
We saw this at our last meeting, yes, this is,
And it's a public document, so,
Huh?
it's a public
they-
document,
It's
so.
been sent, the Board of Health all have it.
yeah. But I guess I'm trying to move it along to that this board says, this is where we are at right now. And this is what we believe, but we want to meet with the Board of Health and finalize
Yeah,
that.
well, I made that motion. I'm waiting for a second.
I'll second.
You want to discuss this more?
I don't think we finished our discussion last time.
That's
did we?
fine, no, all right. Ed has got a few thoughts on it,
Well, not sure I do, but I think we had talked about it.
got a lot of notes.
Well, that's from, and then we did go through that. But, we talked about, our position has been, we would require it, new construction only within the geo boundaries. Input we've gotten via John, that the Board of Health is leaning more towards entire watersheds, and I think that's worthy of consideration by this board in this policy statement, or whatever we wish to call it. I think there's a lot of merit to say, look, if you're making the investment of building a new house, and you're probably in the range of $1 million plus project, spend the extra 25 grand and make it an IA. You're putting in a new Title V, make it an IA if you're within a nitrogen-sensitive watershed or an impaired one under the state definition, which makes it one more evidently. Why not? It's, in the overall scope of the project, a small percentage, and who knows whether the geo-boundary idea is going to work long-term. Doggone it, if it's new construction anywhere within those watersheds, put in an IA. That's what I think our policy should be. I throw that out for discussion. New construction start immediately. Any improvement that requires an increase in flow and an evaluation of the system or an expansion of the system, start that immediately. If the system fails, it should start immediately. Time trigger, we didn't really talk about the time trigger much. We just said this should be a time trigger, but we didn't say what our recommendation is. So I think we should try to firm that up and put that in this, and then, following your suggestion, Steve, send it on to the Board of Health.
I think that's the nature of the discussion between the two boards.
But does this board agree that as written, this is what our feeling is? I don't think we ever took a vote on it.
No, we haven't, that's why I was trying to.
And that's why-
That's why I was trying to work a vote for
Yep.
what's on this piece of paper. Okay.
My suggestion is we modify the policy to start immediately in the entire watershed for new construction failures or increase in flow due to expansion.
So under the conditions, doesn't that cover what you just said?
It's the area covered part, I think.
No, I think it's number one, area covered, we talk about only within the geo boundaries in nitrogen-sensitive areas. And I'm saying, as far as 2A, B, and D, make it the entire watershed.
George, do you want to comment on what
Yeah,
where
we
the
got- we
Board
got-
of Health
yeah,
is at the
hold on,
moment?
time out. We have somebody at the
Hi,
lectern.
Doug Brown, again, for Select Board. I just wanted to throw out one more possible suggestion for consideration, is that maybe there should be another trigger that's substantial improvement, because it might not trigger a flow, but if they're putting on a second floor, a substantial investment, maybe that should also be a trigger. I don't know if it's a 50% trigger. Like, if you do more than 50% in a velocity zone, you have to bring the whole house up to code.
Right.
Or maybe it's not even 50%, some other percentage, but that might be one more thing to add.
I would agree with that, and I think we did talk about what would you use for that 50% of the value of the structure, an appraised number or the assessed, and we agreed that it would be the assessed.
Right.
It is assessed.
Yeah, well, that's the way the wording is in other town policies that have that kind of a stipulation, and I think we should just, don't reinvent the wheel, follow that same precedent and say yes.
The precedent in the town bylaw is market value of the buildings. That's the way the town bylaw reads at the moment. So that's essentially the appraised value. Assessed value is less, but if you look at our bylaw, the actual wording is at the market value of the structures.
But you can have a multiplier to correct, on
that's
average,
different,
either
my
one to the other one. So all that matters is which is the simplest to measure and the most reliable. If you're worried that the assessed value is too low, say
Yeah, I'm-
1.5 times the assessed value.
I'm
But-
simply stating what the town bylaw says at the moment. If we want to change it, that's a different discussion. But the bylaw at the moment reads at the market value of the structures.
That's probably correct, but that doesn't mean, this board thought that the assessed was more reliable.
That should be part of our discussion.
I would ask Doug, isn't it your understanding that's the assessed value of the structure, not the unappraised?
When I do construction projects, if we're in a velocity zone, we use the assessed value because the town doesn't require us to get an appraisal. But you have the opportunity to go out and get an appraisal if you want to contest the assessed value.
Yeah, we had language like that before, John. It seems to have not be in the current version, so. Right.
If you look in the bylaws of the town of Falmouth,
Yeah,
it says the way that you define major reconstruction is 50% or more of the market value of the structures. And if we,
Like that because if anybody's going to contest, say a person that's been paying taxes for 40 years but never improved their property. So now the new buyer comes along and says, this thing's not worth that. I'm going to contest it. I'm going to get my own appraisal. So that's probably why that wording is in there.
yeah, maybe I've got a little nuance here, John. If I look over here, if I look at this sheet, the current sheet, the major reconstruction is not on here. It may be defined someplace in the bylaw for what it is, but it's not, it doesn't say that you have to do, it says new construction, improvements where there's an increase in flow, transfer of title. Don't
that's
have-
quite an old sheet you've got.
Really? Okay. Sorry. I will have to go to my computer and find the current one and print it.
Anyway,
All right,
I think, the point is, I think these are the exact things that we want to chat with the Board of Health about.
You have the same one I have.
Should be. Can I just see Steve?
Yeah, I mean, Ed and I both have that one. maybe what got posted up or showed up.
No, this is,
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Same to you.
Thank you for the candy. We're all jacked up.
Yeah,
on
you're a
it.
nice guy.
this is a much earlier version than what we've been chatting about.
Kristen, can we just make sure that whatever John's latest, John, send your latest to Kristen and she'll circulate it
I've
around.
got, the one I have says substantial improvement of a structure
Okay,
as item B for
okay,
the triggers.
okay.
Say as defined in
It was
town
distributed
bylaws.
last,
Leave it at that.
that's what I got.
Can you send that to
John's been trying to
everybody?
get you to stand up. I'm not sure what for, George, but
I could state just briefly that everything I've heard today is we're not struggling with anything at all. The only one point of sort of discussion will be failures. A failure, when somebody's system fails, they're at a pretty critical point in your life. It's like somebody told you have to go to the doctor and it's going to cost a lot of money. So we are discussing having, as we do now as a policy, anywhere in the TMDL areas or assigned NSAs, according to the state, that anybody putting in a system in there now has to have a block on the engineer drawing where that IA would go if we're not requiring it right then. And that's where we're thinking of going with the repair situation. Because somebody has a failed system, you're not going to whack them with an extra unsubsidized, at this point, fee. So we said, put the thing on the plan, and at the next real estate transfer, when that property transfers, it must put the system in. So that gives a homeowner a choice. He can say, gee, I look down the line and see, I'm going to sell this house, it's going to have that tag on my deed restriction, so now I'll put it in now, if they can afford it. If they can't and they're strapped, what are we gonna do? Say, oh no, you have to put that in, go double mortgage, sell your kidney, do something else. So that's what we're sort of settling on, but everything else is the same. We looked at the geo boundaries, and we have some provisions for it. The sewer is anticipated within 5 years of not putting it in. However, having again that being on the plan, if you are planning on putting in the sewer just in case something happens there. So I think everything that you've talked about is, we'll probably find general agreement on. And we went with the assessed value simply because it would catch more. Most likely would catch more, people would have to upgrade. I mean, it's at a point where they're doing something to their home which is fairly substantial, adding a bedroom or doing something, or even if they're not adding a bedroom, we felt that within the NSA, nitrogen-sensitive areas as defined by the state, that they should put an IA system in.
I think we're very close. The other sort of nuance here is, as the Board of Health, you can do certain things without the selectmen giving approval, and we are an advisory board to the selectmen. So at some point, like I say, we're gonna put together a thing, tell the selectmen where we're at with all of these NSA, nitrogen-sensitive areas and where we think we're going, to get the select board to accept or agree with what we think.
Yeah, the only one that's a question for us, the NSA see their boundary, they're already defined. And when a Board of Health makes a regulation in order to avoid arbitrary and capricious, we have to have some boundary that's accepted. Since the geo-boundary had not been accepted yet, we figured, well, we are concerned about the whole watershed. So we're looking at the watershed, not necessarily the geo-boundaries, which weren't really defined as saying this is where you need to put all your IA systems.
No,
That was an exercise.
No argument with you. We're just suggesting the extent to which IAs may be required, but we have not done a watershed plan and said this is the line in the sand.
Now, would you allow me 30 seconds of rant? Flow neutral bylaw,
Wait a minute,
It's
wait a minute,
just
wait
past
a
the
minute.
4.
Wait a minute, hold on.
30 seconds.
Okay, let me 30 seconds.
Ready?
Got the stopwatch going, go.
Flow neutral bylaw is not flow neutral. We approved a restaurant in town that otherwise would not be able to fit a Title V system. So to me, it's a misnomer. We gave 2,000 plus gallons to a restaurant that doesn't exist in an existing building that could never put a Title V in. It ranked me, and I'm just letting you know that. That's my 30 seconds. Flow
how did
neutral
you- how did you
bylaw
vote
is a
on that one?
misnomer.
You got 10 seconds more, keep going.
It is a misnomer.
All right,
Steve, a question here. So I'm still concerned about the definition under the time trigger, that after 15 years, and we touched upon this last week, saying that you'd have a lot of systems, the vast majority of the systems are not going to be covered under A through D, they're going to be the ones that have to upgrade, right? And we're going to say in years 15 through 20, we're going to have to put in whatever number, 5,000, 6,000 of these systems. It just doesn't seem realistic to me. Is this going to be discussed with the Board of Health, that,
I
are
think
there
that's
ways
a-
we can phase in this,
Yeah.
the construction of the septic systems much earlier and over a longer period of time?
so there's a little bit of a who's on first exercise here. We've been looking at this concept of geo-boundaries inside watersheds, and then we've said, you know, what sort of rules are likely to be required once we finally define where those areas are. We don't have any final definitions yet, John, okay? Final definitions will come when we get back into doing the watershed plans and submit it. You know, we might expand the areas for sewerage and reduce the areas for IAs over the next several months or over the next year when we get to the watershed plan, okay? So I agree with you that for now, the action that's gonna be taken is gonna be action taken by the Board of Health, right? But that when we do watershed plans, we're probably gonna come back and say, here's a 20-year plan for these watersheds or this watershed. Here's the expectation of how many IAs we will get by this date or time, okay? So that 15 years is just it's almost like a placeholder right now, okay?
How is it, what made 15 the magic number? Is there some basis for that
I
technically?
just pulled it out.
John likes
pulled it
15.
out of
John
my
likes 15.
elbow.
It's one of his favorite numbers.
I had no, and the time trigger is clearly the soft part in that whole, we've got to think about that much more critically.
Well, there's 20 years to implement, isn't that the,
We've got a 20-year window.
So from the date
so that provides you with a cushion.
that the watershed plan is approved by the DEP, you've got 20 years. We've got a,
19.8.
I can't remember, we have a two or 3 year period to create the watershed plans right now, Amy? Something like
I
that,
thought it
right?
was, originally, was it 5?
It's over the next 4 years.
Yeah, they all go at a different time, so, so there's there's probably 22 to 25 years,
Right.
okay? Depending on which watershed.
But it's
plan is
reasonable
approved.
to have a cushion and a target that's less than the max. I would agree.
But one of the problems that the Board of Health is, as George just articulated, the Board of Health has to do things based upon something that's known. So the Board of Health can say, inside an NSA, we want to set these rules. Now, the Board of Health could turn around and say, people have to have some configuration, or they could choose their own timeline for that, for the entire watershed. Okay? There's no defined geo-boundaries yet, so they couldn't turn around and say, for people that are inside a geo-boundary, you have to do this, because there's officially no geo-boundary yet. We've not done a watershed plan to create them.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm
Okay.
just saying that you're delaying something that we're probably gonna have to fix, because you don't wanna push this all out to year 15.
They're not gonna push it here,
And if we're saying in the detailed watershed plans will mitigate that issue, that's fine.
in my mind, I've always had once we work our way through the subsidy thing, we turn around and say, okay, any individual homeowner will get, I'm just gonna go down John's path, $20,000 for a unit, okay? If you put it in year 1 to 5 of the watershed plan, the town will pay $12,000 of that $20,000. If you do it in year 6 to 10, the town will pay $6,000. And if you do it in year 15 to 20, the town will pay $3,000. So it'll be a decreasing number that the town will pay the longer you wait to put it in. So there's a carrot there to do it sooner. That's my proposal.
I brought that up.
That's his proposal. I said that. I did.
It's fine.
I don't think the argument that, even though it's true that you may increase the number of sewers and decrease the number of IAs, it's still gonna be thousands of IAs. So John is still right on that point. But the other thing I have a question for George. How does one decide where the jurisdiction boundary is between the Board of Health and the Water Quality Committee? I mean, I know you probably know more about IAs than anybody in this room, but is it really a health issue? And especially in that you're planning to allow plenty of people to keep their Title V.
Because it's an NSA as defined in Title V now, and the new regulation which talks about nitrogen-sensitive areas, the Board of Health can regulate it. And I will say, just parenthetically, the split between public health, Department of Public Health, and DEP is really kind of rare around the country. We're supposed to regulate septic systems in Title V, but Department of Public Health has nothing to do with it, zero to do with it. So our jurisdiction comes because our authority has been granted to us for Title V enforcement. We are the local authority for that. Once DEP defined an area, just like they did around Zone 2s, they said in a Zone 2 you can only do this. This is what the Board of Health needs to enforce. Now they come up with a new NSA, a new nitrogen-sensitive area considering marine environments. They've defined where it is, just like they define a Zone 2 and an interim Zone 2 at so many feet from a well. We have to enforce around it. The latitude we have in there is, they're not even sure what the town will do to meet their TMDL. And we're not sure what you're going to do. All we know is that we need to be moving toward that target. So that's where the best available nitrogen technologies came in. Once they put that list together, God, that helps us a lot, because we know there are a lot of technologies out there that those dogs won't hunt. They should take them home. And there's a few top dogs that we say, yeah, we would like to see these in our town. Now that they're on an official list, the Board of Health can say, look, we have NSAs, we have best nitrogen-sensitive, nitrogen available technology, we're going to require it, we can do that. So we go on boundaries that are set by DEP, because they said these are the NSAs. They give us some other tools, because they didn't with those IAs. And if they didn't come out with some sort of preferred list for within these things, believe me, they would have just said, use anything you want there that has a general use approval for nitrogen removal. And that would have meant using all those we could have used in Zone 2s, which, as you know, the levels for Zone 2s are pretty high. It's 5 milligrams per liter or 10 at the property boundary. These levels that need to be set are a lot more strict than 19 milligrams per liter. So that's our authority. That's how we do it. And we plod along like you guys. We do the best we can within the regulation boundary given us. That's our boundary.
So question for George. So this language says something like 10 milligrams per liter shall operate at 10 milligrams per liter or less and maintain that level for the life of the system.
Right.
None of them are perfect under 10 all the time.
Correct.
So I just wonder if we shouldn't have more accurate wording.
I think, Ken, we can take care of this.
Okay, within our regulation.
Right.
I mean, median performance, average
So
performance.
Ken, already inside the Board of Health home rule regulation, there's a definition of how to measure
All right.
and what constitutes performance.
Okay.
Which allows a couple of
I'm
outliers.
just looking at this,
Allows a
so-
couple of outliers, yeah, so we need to, in terms of our recommendation, tie it back to,
Yeah.
you know, as measured in accordance with the current.
The
Board of
entire
Health.
home rule regulation allows you to show us that it's an equivalency, because somebody given 300 milligrams per liter as an influent can't meet 5.
There's that,
can't
but
meet
there's
10.
also just day-to-day variation.
Yes,
and
and
all that.
I'll tell you, I think that DEP needs to start considering those NSAs and the permits that you're going to get as being somewhat like a wastewater permit, and saying, you know, you're gonna put 5,000 of these things in a watershed, and they're gonna say, everyone has to meet this? Well, some are gonna do a lot better and some are gonna do a lot worse. They don't presently allow anything such as averaging or saying, okay, in general, here's our loading we're giving you. There's a lot of, I could go on forever with the
Responsible
problems
management
of not treating a watershed permit like we treat wastewater permits. But that'll be a discussion with the Board of Health. We're glad to have it. We're glad you guys are engaged, and we're ready to have the discussion.
I say Amy, I just want to be sure that nobody else has a question for George. Amy?
I just wanted to bring up two things about the IAs and sewers, both being in the town's future. So number one, under this list you're talking about, says that it's going to be cover areas excluding those properties identified for future sewering. That's unfortunately less clear than we'd all like it to be at this point. So that's something we're gonna have to resolve in order to do this. The targeted watershed management plan had, concrete plans for Great Pond Phase 1 and 2. Everything else is a pink, blob on a map that has not gotten that much consideration yet. There are some areas north of Route 28 which will likely need to be sewered at some point, but that the town it will definitely be more than 20 years and could be 30 years before they're sewered. So I'm less concerned about that. I think that